The views expressed on this broadcast of Speaker Monday with your host, the Monty Man, do not necessarily reflect the opinions of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT is not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
Just when you think you have all your ducks in a row, life takes a spin. It happens again and again. It seems to me that when I take my will and let you go, without the booze, I've been living, that's a fact. Without the booze,
I've been making my way back.
without the booze, I've been learning day by day to let it go and stay out of my own way.
Welcome to Speaker Monday with the Monty Man. Each week, Monty brings us speakers from a variety of 12-step fellowships. Now here's the Monty Man with this week's speaker.
Well, greetings one and all, and welcome to a brand new year, the year 2015. What an absolute honor it is to be with you today. Speaker Monday, starting out a brand new year. Welcome to January. I trust that your holiday season has been an eventful one, and that you're healthy, and I hope that you're sober. I have got a treat for you. You are just going to love this. I know that you are, no matter who you are, whether you're brand new in recovery or if you've been around for years. Our former Board of Directors Chairman, Mr. Chris S., is speaking on the Bill Wilson story. This is a two-part series, and this week we are bringing you part one. You don't want to miss part two, believe me. You are not going to learn much of this information by going to your average AA meeting today. You are going to learn it here at Take 12 Recovery Radio. It is absolutely amazing stuff. You're going to learn about a man who is much of the time highly criticized. But to his credit, you're going to learn some wonderful information about how the creator of the universe worked through this man, Bill Wilson, to give us the tools that we have today, the most successful tools in the recovery process of recovering from alcoholism that really the world has ever seen or heard of. So without further ado, here is part one of the Bill Wilson story with Chris S.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris, and I am an alcoholic. I think this is the third year I'm doing this. I love coming back to this room. Probably most of the people in this room aren't aware of this. I know Bill over there is. But this is pretty much hallowed ground for conservative, literature-based, big book style Alcoholics Anonymous. A couple of people back in the 90s started a meeting in this room, and one of the guys, Mike, was just a genius at tracking down really amazing speakers, and he brought people like Mark Houston and Joe Hawk and Chris Raymer and all these, Scott Redman, all these unbelievable speakers. And I met many of them in this room back in the 90s and 2000, 2001. So it's very, very cool for me to be here. Now tonight we're going to be going over one of the drafts, the early drafts of Bill's story. And I find I do a lot of historical studies, not necessarily Alcoholics Anonymous these days, but I'm very, very interested in Civil War history. I'm interested in the history of Rome and first century Christianity, things like that. And I study this stuff critically, historically. And I'm just interested in that. You can study religion two ways. You can study it devotionally, or you can study it critically and historically. And I just happen to be one of the guys who likes the critical historical methods. And one of the things that I've learned in it is if you want to get to the original voice, the original message, you have to go back through the earliest layers of tradition. So when something like this is found, one of the earlier drafts of Bill's story, I find it incredibly interesting because it's going to have maybe a little bit more of an authentic voice than what happens after you rewrite something, 10 or 20 times. Bill was a great rewriter. But alcoholism recovery owes so much to Bill Wilson. He was the principal architect of the 12-step recovery process. And the 12-step recovery process really is the how and the why of our personal recoveries. Why did we survive alcoholism, which is a progressively fatal illness? Why are we sitting here tonight as survivors of this tragic malady? I believe it has a lot to do with the work that Bill Wilson did, and the type of person that he was. So when we're going through tonight, we're going to be doing a lot of historical view on Bill's early life that's going to lead up to his last drink, and we're going to stop there. But what I'm going to be trying to look for is what type of a man was this? There were people that were getting sober around the time and even before Bill Wilson in the Oxford group and some of the early religious and spiritual movements that were happening around the turn of the century. Many people. Bill wasn't even the first person to write a book about alcoholism recovery who got sober in the Oxford group and some of these other groups. But one thing that he did that these other people didn't do was he came to the conclusion that alcoholics were dying all over the place. What the vision of recovery that he came across and the spiritual processes that he discovered in the Oxford group, he knew that would offer an escape to many, many people from alcoholism. And unlike many of the people that got sober and then went about their lives, and got back into the swing of things, he dedicated the rest of his life to carrying the message to us. And this is just amazing. He was a Wall Street guy. He had made a lot of money and lost a lot of money. For him to walk away from his ability to hustle on Wall Street and work with us was a real commitment and a very, very, altruistic move on his part. And in this day and age with a lot of the movies, there's like a new movie on Bill Wilson. I don't know if anybody out here has seen it, but there's been books. There was the book that, what's her name, wrote, and we seem to love to talk about how imperfect Bill Wilson was. And his womanizing and his LSD use. I mean, we want to dig into this stuff because to muckrake. And I'll tell you what, I don't really see that's fair in his case, because what was really cool about Bill is he never professed to be a saint. Yeah, he always wanted to be a number one guy, but he would never tell you that he was spiritually advanced. Quite the opposite. And whenever someone would get angry at him about some fault that they saw in him and give him a hard time, his reaction would be, I'm really sorry that you feel that way about me. You obviously have me on a pedestal I never asked to be on. And I'll tell you that what a wonderful way to be as alcoholics, because we need to hold on to a humble self-appraisal. We need to remain right-sized, and to learn from him about how to handle this criticism, and about how to stay spiritually centered is an important lesson that we can get from him. Anyway, I'm going to start reading. We'll start on the first page. Bill's story. Now, a couple of things to watch out for. Watch out for him needing to be important. That's something that all alcoholics share. An inability to really feel like you're fitting in, the way you need to fit in, or you're showing up the way you need to show up. Look for those characteristics that you might have in yourself. At the age of 10, I went to live with my grandfather and grandmother. Their ancestors settled the section of Vermont in which I was to grow up. Unfortunately, his parents separated. His father ran off to Canada to operate, I think it was some type of rock mine, some type of quarry, and just, split. And his mother decided she wanted to become a doctor. So she split to go to medical school. And, Bill is like, whoa, what's going on here? And what happened was he was basically left with his grandparents. If anybody has been to the Wilson House in East Dorset, Vermont, you'll understand where this was at. This was rural. It's still rural today when you go up there. This was the sticks of the boondocks. 4 miles away was Manchester, but even back around the turn of the century, even that was a very, very small town. Grandfather was a retired farmer and a lumberman. He nurtured me on a vigorous pioneering tradition. I see now that my grandfather was the kind of man who helped make America. Little did anyone guess I was to be of the war generation, which would squander the savings, the pioneering traditions, and the incredible stamina of your grandfather and mine. Ambitious but undisciplined that I was. There was a genius for postponing, evading, and shirking, but a certain dogged obstinacy, persistence, drove me to succeed at special undertakings upon which my heart was set. I got to tell you, I understand a little bit with that. I have an absolute genius in my ability to postpone things and evade and shirk. I'm a black belt at it. I really try to work toward not doing it, and I'm in a place where I've gotten a lot of promotions in the last 10 years, so I'm obviously not applying this the way I used to. But I'll give you just from some examples. I joined the wrestling team. I went to one practice. I joined the Boy Scouts. I went on one camp out. I started to take guitar lessons. I took 2 guitar lessons and stole the guitar. I went to college in Florida for 3.5 years. I got 8 credits. Think about that. So I understand Bill. However, if I got interested in something like jazz music, which is something I got really interested in, and bought like 25,000 records, and I learned it better than the people who were teaching jazz at the colleges, if I really got into something, I'd do a great job. Especially did I revel in attacking the difficult or the impossible. Grandfather, for instance, said that no one but an Australian could make and throw the boomerang. No schoolwork was done, no woodbox filled, and little sleep was there until a boomerang had circled the church steeple, returning to almost decapitate him. Having accomplished this, my interest ceased. So it was with my ambition to be a ball player, for I was finally elected captain of the team at the little seminary I attended after leaving country school. Someone told me I could never sing, so I took up voice until I had appeared in a recital. Then, as with the boomerang, my interest ended abruptly. I had commenced to fuss with the violin. This became such an obsession that athletics, schoolwork, and all else went by the board, much to everyone's consternation. I carried fiddling so far I failed to graduate. It was most embarrassing, for I was president of the senior class. just beautiful. The alcoholic is a contradiction, in terms so many times. So collapsed a certain legend of infallibility I had built around myself. Repairing this failure, I attempted to enter a leading technical school. Because of fierce enthusiasms I had displayed for matters chemical and electrical, it was assumed I was destined to become an engineer. At Boston, I failed the entrance examinations dismally. My people were heartbroken, and my self-sufficiency got another severe deflation. Finally, I commenced electrical engineering at an excellent military college where it was fervently hoped I would get disciplined. No such thing happened. I wouldn't have gotten disciplined in a military school either. You know what I majored in high school? Exit. That sign up there, that's what I majored in. I need out of here. And I learned how to get out. My whole high school career, I took Wednesdays off. The teacher would go, "Where's Chris?" And somebody would say, "Hey, it's Wednesday. It's his day off." "Oh, yeah." I thought 5 days in a row was onerous. Come on. Are you kidding me? 5 days in a row. So I figured I'd split it up, make things a little bit more palatable. Somehow I got away with it, too. As usual, I had good grades when interested, but often failed when not. I flunked completely my first year in high school, and then I was put in the work-study program, the football helmet, group. And believe me, I did not belong there. I come from a really smart family. My brother and sister are both college professor PhDs. My mother and father were both Phi Beta Kappa from great colleges. And I have brains. I'm alcoholic. I don't care sometimes. You know what I mean? It's just, you can't convince me of the importance of any of this. And that's really my problem. If I had potential. They used to tell me I had potential. And anybody in here have unused potential? Did you ever hear that? Well, that was me. As usual, I had good grades when interested, but often failed when not. There was an illuminating instance concerning my calculus teacher. Not one formula would I learn until all of the theory underlying the subject was made clear. At the library, I pored over the researches of Leibniz and Newton, whose genius had made calculus possible. Loving controversy, I argued much with my instructor, who quite properly gave me a 0, for I had solved only the first problem of the course. At this juncture, and quite conveniently for me, the United States decided to go to war. We students bolted almost to a man for the first officers' training camp at Plattsburgh. I was commissioned a second lieutenant of artillery, electing that branch rather than aviation or infantry. For when I lay in my bunk at night, I had to confess I did not want to be killed. This suspicion of cowardice bothered me, for it couldn't be reconciled with the truly exalted patriotism which took possession when I hadn't time to think. Later, under fire abroad, I was relieved to learn I was like most men, scared enough but willing to see it through. I was assigned to a post on the New England coast. The place is famous for its Yankee trading and whaling traditions. 2 far-reaching events took place here. I married, had my first drink, and liked it. My wife was city-bred. She represented a way of life for which I secretly longed. He married above him. This is kind of something I did too with my first wife. My first wife's father was a president of Chrysler Motors in South America, and just highfalutin. And here I was, a long-haired hippie, stoned out of my mind. Yeah, I'll take care of your daughter. Oh God, I can still see him looking at me, like holy God. To be her kind meant fine houses, servants, gay dinners, cultivated conversation, and a much envied sophistication. I often felt a woeful lack of poise and polish. He was a dork. These inferiorities were later to drive me cityward in quest of success, as I supposed they have many a country boy. War fever ran high, and I was flattered that the first citizens of town took us to their homes and made me feel comfortable and heroic. They'd have big parties for the service people. You know, it was like a status thing, and they'd get you all drunked up. So here was love, applause, adventure, war, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was part of life at last. Think about this. This coincided with the booze. He is part of life at last now that he's drinking. Has anybody in here ever asked you, what's wrong with you? Have you ever heard that? What the hell is wrong with you? And you don't really know how to answer that. You know, here's the thing. This is my personal experience. Up until 12 years old, I was uncomfortable with myself, my environment. I was unbelievably shy. I couldn't speak, you know, in a classroom. I couldn't give an oral report. It was hard for me to ask a girl to dance at the barn dances. I mean, I had all this self-centered fear. It was like an anxiety, just a level of anxiety across my world. And all of a sudden, I discovered booze. And the first time it started to go down into my veins, I felt like, now I understand now how you feel. You know, that's really what I thought. I go, this booze is making me feel like I know that all of you feel, you know, normally. This is making me feel, this is taking away the fear. This is taking away that anxiety. I can step out now. I can ask that girl to dance. I can talk in front of people. You know, I can do all these things. And here's the thing. Here's what I looked like on the outside. Up until 12 years old, I looked fairly together kid. You know, there wasn't a lot of problems. Nobody was saying, what the hell's wrong with you? I was just kind of getting along. But then when I discovered booze and I started crashing cars and getting in trouble, people were saying, what's wrong with you? I'm like, nothing now, you know. Like I've discovered a tool to be able to deal, you know, and listen, you don't get it. You just don't get it. So, you know, stay away from me. And that's really my experience. When I discovered alcohol, I discovered that I could do things that I normally would feel way too uncomfortable to do. My gaucheries and ineptitudes magically disappeared, and I discovered the siphon and the Bronx cocktail. Strong warnings and the prejudices of my people concerning drink evaporated. Then came parting with its bizarre mixture of sadness, high purpose, the strange elation which goes with adventure having fatal possibilities. Many of us sailed for over there. Loneliness seized me, only to be whisked away by my charming companion, Prince Alcohol. We were in England. I stood in Winchester Cathedral with head bowed in the presence of something I had never felt before. You know, Winchester Cathedral, if you've ever been there, it's amazing. Some of these 800-year-old cathedrals are just extraordinary. There's a spirituality when you walk into them. You know, you have a spiritual experience. Where now was the God of the preachers? Across the channel, thousands were perishing that day. Why did he not come? Suddenly, in that moment of darkness, he was there. I felt an enveloping, comforting presence. Tears stood in my eyes. I had glimpsed the great reality. Much moved, I wandered through the cathedral yard. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. Here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking small cold beer. A soldier is ne'er forgot whether he dieth by musket or by pot. My mood changed. A squadron of fighters roared overhead. I cried to myself, here's to adventure. The feeling of being in the great presence disappeared. So he had a spiritual experience. Now, if you jump ahead a little bit into the steps, the 12-step recovery process, having had a spiritual awakening, I believe that we can have spiritual experiences. And one of the first times I ever had a spiritual experience was the first time I got high on pot and the first time I got high on LSD. I mean, those are legitimate spiritual experiences. They're artificially induced, but they're legitimate. And you know, I had a bunch of those. Now, the recovery process, the cool thing about recovery is you can have those spiritual experiences and they can lead to a spiritual awakening, which is the treatment for alcoholism. One of the great things about Bill Wilson in the First 100, one of the pieces of genius was they recognized that you don't fight alcoholism with sobriety. They had tried to stay sober 100 ways, 100 times. That's not how you have to fight alcoholism. You have to fight alcoholism with spirituality. And I think this experience that he had in Winchester Cathedral stuck with him. I think it was a connection that he had to the divine. And I believe it led to other things. Homecoming arrived at last, 22 and a veteran of foreign wars. I fancied myself a leader, for had not the men of my battery given me a special token of appreciation. Leadership, I imagined, would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with the assurance of a great pipe organist that has stops and keys. Soon enough, I was brought to earth, a position at half the army pay, and that's got to be pretty bad, from which I was presently discharged as a poor and rebellious bookkeeper, was the first salutation of unsentimental industry. My resentment was so great I nearly turned socialist, which in Vermont is downright treason. Humiliation, maybe not these days. Humiliation and more came when my wife got a much better job and commenced to pay the bills. You know, she got a better job by working at like a Sears and Roebuck or kind of a place, a Macy's or something. It was not good. I fancied my New City friends were snickering at my predicament. Unwillingly, I had to admit that I was not trained for anything. Characteristically, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Though drinking was not continuous, it frequently disturbed my wife. We had long talks when I would still her foreboding by saying men of genius conceived their vast projects when jingled. That the most majestic constructions of philosophical thought were so derived. What a pile of crap. You know, I love that. I love that. You know, I mean, listen, if we need to justify our drinking, we'll figure out how to do it. It doesn't matter what kind of paint we're going to throw up on the wall. We're going to make it sound reasonable. You know, I thought at one point in time, truly, I believed some of this stuff myself. I really thought that I had a unique type of personality. It was kind of like an artistic, sensitive personality. And I recognized the truth of reality at such a sharp level that I needed sedation at a normal, as a normal process to not feel the pain, you know, of being that smart. You know, I don't know what, you know, I mean, you have to come up with some reason why you're getting blackout drunk every day, you know. And that was one of the ones that I used. I was special, you know. When the law course was done, I knew the profession was not for me. You know, he finishes his law course. He doesn't even pick up his degree. That's just beautiful. Anybody in here good starters? Anybody in here bad finishers? Yeah, that's typical too. The inviting maelstrom of the street had me in its grip. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. This was like the roaring 20s, okay? You could be a meathead and make $1 million in the roaring 20s, because what you could do is, if you even had a little bit of credit, you could get stock on margin, which means you could put 5% down. You could put $5 down and get $100 worth of stock. And if it's on the way up and it goes up, you can sell that stock and keep the profit. You know, you only put $5 out. So while all the stock is going up, everybody's making money. And that's really what was happening in the 20s. Reminiscent of the boomerang episode, I became wholly absorbed and fascinated. Out of this tissue of drink and speculation, I commenced to forge the weapon that one day would turn in its flight and all but cut me to ribbons. Both at work and living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000, which would be like $100,000 now, probably. It went into utility stocks, then cheap and unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. Failing to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking over factories and managements, my wife and I decided to go anyhow. I had a theory people lost money in stocks by not knowing markets, managements, and the ideas at work in a given situation. I discovered a lot more reasons later on. Really what Bill Wilson did was he became one of the earliest stock analysts. Today they're all over the place in the hedge funds, in the brokerage houses, in the financial institutions, and it's people who do their due diligence on these specific industries. If they're going to invest the money, they need to see the Dun & Bradstreets, they need to see the corporate philosophy, the 5-year plans, and Bill Wilson was basically one of the earliest guys to come up with these ideas. We quit our positions and off we romped on a motorcycle and a sidecar stuffed with tent, blankets, change of clothes, and 3 huge volumes of financial reference service. Mainly Lois was driving and he was sitting in the sidecar getting drunk. Our friends almost, and listen, this was his idea. He would go to the bars next to these big companies and get drunk with the people after they were getting off of work and pull information out of them. That's what he was writing his reports on, if you can imagine. Our friends almost wanted a lunacy commission appointed. Perhaps they were right. There had been some success at speculation, so we had a little money, though we once worked on a farm for a month to avoid drawing on our capital. It was the last honest manual work for many a day. The whole eastern United States was covered in a year. At the end of it, strangely enough, my reports sent back to Wall Street procured for me a position there and the use of what seemed to be a large sum of money. The exercise of an option brought in more money, and we had several $1,000s profit. For the next few years, fortune threw money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many to the tune of paper millions. So he gets lucky. He makes a lot of money. I've sponsored a lot of people, and living in this area, there's a lot of people that you end up sponsoring who make a ton of money because we're really close to the financial area in New York City. I've sponsored dozens of millionaires. And normally, some of them are really intelligent and some of them are some of them are hard workers. Some of them are just good bullshitters. And a lot of times they've gotten the right job at the right time. And I think that's basically what happened with Bill. The great boom of the late 20s was soothing and swelling. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part in my life. Loud talk in the jazz places uptown. We all spent in thousands and chattered in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. Of course they didn't. I made a host of fair weather friends. My drinking had assumed more serious proportions going on all day and nearly every night. This is a problem. But if you do a lot of your business in the bars, which really kind of Bill did, he'd get in trouble, going to the houses, the financial institution houses. He'd do a lot of his work in the bars. When your drinking becomes continuous, it's a problem. In this day and age, you pretty much become unemployable. Back in the day, they would allow somebody their drink. Anybody in here ever see the show Mad Men on TV? It's a show about early 60s advertising in Manhattan. These guys go to work and start drinking scotch and smoking Lucky Strikes. I mean, it's the first thing you do when you get to work. That was the 60s. Can you imagine the 20s? Now, it's really only in the modern era where that's frowned upon. Smoking and drinking, while you're working is frowned upon. But not too many decades ago, it was okay. As long as you held your liquor like a man, Remonstrance of my cooler associates terminated in a row, and I became a lone wolf. Anybody in here become a lone wolf? All of a sudden your life just starts getting smaller and smaller and smaller because you're just getting pissed off, or you're pissing people off, or they're not understanding, or whatever, and your life is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's alcoholism. There were many unhappy scenes in our apartment. This, by the way, was large, for I'd rented 2 and had the wall between knocked out. There had been no great infidelity. Loyalty to my wife and sometimes extreme drunkenness kept me out of those scrapes. We'll debate about that. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. That is a terrible illness. We went at once to the country, my wife to applaud, while I overtook Walter Hagen. Golf permitted drinking both day and night. It was fun to carome around the exclusive course, which had inspired such awe in me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable coat of tan seen upon the well-to-do. With amused skepticism, the local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till. Now, what do you do on the golf course? Especially back in the day. You're darn right you drink. That's half the caddy's job is carrying your booze around. Abruptly in October 1929, the whirling movement ceased. Black Friday. Hell had broken loose on the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from the hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market closed. The ticker still clattered. I was staring at an inch of tape. It bore the inscription PFK 32. It had been 52 that morning. I was done, and so were many of my friends. Remember, he didn't pay full price for these stocks. He paid a percentage. And if they went down more than the percentage he paid, he now owed money. I was done, and so were many of my friends. The papers said men were already jumping to death from those towers of Babel that were high finance. That disgusted me. Going back to the bar, I felt glad I would not jump. My friends had dropped several millions since 10 o'clock, so what? Tomorrow was another day. As I drank, the old fierce determination to win came back. A lot of times, we can be just demoralized and we can start drinking. And, we can be like, oh my God, the boss is going to fire me. I'm really screwing up at work. I can't believe I made that mistake today. Oh my God, oh my God. 3 or 4 drinks in, it's like, you know what? Screw him. They don't deserve me. He's an idiot. I mean, one time I called up my boss and I threatened his life in a blackout. I said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And it was a blackout, right? So I didn't remember it. And I get up and I just go to work the next day like nothing said. And I walk in. What are you doing here? Oh, it was bad. Next morning, I called a friend in Montreal, because New York was done. He had plenty of money left, so he thought I had better come up. By the following spring, we were living in our accustomed style. It was like Napoleon returning from Elba. No St. Helena for me. But I soon excelled as a serious and frivolous drinker, and my generous friend had to let me go. This time we stayed broke. Listen, he basically said, this is the thing. The biggest mistake, the biggest misperception in Alcoholics Anonymous and with the people that treat us and with society at large is the understanding of powerlessness. Powerlessness is misunderstood. Everybody thinks we need to just hitch up our bootstraps and stop drinking. Well, if we're powerless over alcohol, we don't have the ability to do that. And so when somebody's telling you to put the plug in the jug, as an alcoholic, you're plugless. You don't have a plug to put in the jug. When you're asked to just don't take a drink no matter what, and you're an alcoholic, you're being asked to do something you don't have the power to do. Now, a good example is what happened with Bill when he was up in Montreal. He had gotten drunk a couple of times, and this buddy of his who was paying him really good money, he was one of the survivors out of Manhattan, and he who's still making some money, who isn't ruined, and he's up in Montreal, and this guy goes, Bill, you got to promise me you're never going to drink again. You embarrassed me in that business meeting yesterday. I am telling you, this is it. If you ever show up to work drunk again, you are finished. I promise I'll never do it again. I promise I'll never do it again. Well, he was promising something he didn't have the power to do or to not do. He showed up drunk again in a very short period of time, and the guy said, see you later, Bill. I can't have you representing my company. How many times did this happen to us? How many promises have we made, thinking we actually believed we were going to not drink anymore, thinking we had the power to do that? This time, I really mean it. All those 475 other times, I didn't really mean it. This time I mean, you're freaking powerless. Okay, stop promising something you can't promise. You know, you need what Bill found out with the first 100 is that there's a power that you need to access. This power needs to work in you and through you, and you need to access it through a series of spiritual exercises, or you are done. You are hosed. That's the only way they've found to be able to stay separated from alcohol, is to practice these spiritual principles in your life. It doesn't matter how much you want to not drink. It means nothing if you're an alcoholic. Personally, this is the last 2 or 3 years of my drinking. This is what would happen to me. I would come to in the morning, just shattered, just the eyes yellow, your hair standing up, I'd fallen out of my chair and big lump on my head. I'd stagger into the bathroom to do my vomiting calisthenics, blah, blah, I'd throw some water on my face. I'd go out to the car, big film over my eyes. I'd get out to the car. Listen, if I'd been pulled over driving to work, I hadn't had a drink since 8 o'clock the night before, but if I was pulled over driving to work, I would have blown a 7-0. I mean, there was so much vodka or bourbon coming out of my pores. I'd get to work and I'd just be shattered. I'd be like, and I would be swearing to God that I never want to feel like this again. Today is the day. Today is the day I'm going to not drink when I get home tonight. I'm going to stop drinking, and today is the day. And if you would have hooked me up to a lie detector and said, Chris, are you ever going to drink again? I would have said no. And the polygraph expert would have said, he's telling the truth. Put money on the bank. This guy's never drinking again. Because I meant it with every fiber of my being. By noon, I'd get half a sandwich down. I'd be rehydrated. By about 1 o'clock, I'd be thinking about quitting time, and I'd be saying to myself, that decision that you made earlier this morning about never, ever drinking again, that's a pretty strong position to take. That's kind of an overreaction to this whole thing. I think I'm going to have to modify that. And it'd be like 3 o'clock. I'd be getting off at 3:30, and I'd say, as a matter of fact, I'm going to stop at the liquor store on the way home. I'm just going to get a quart, just to, chill. And I would buy vodka or bourbon on the way home after being absolutely certain that morning I was never going to do it again. What is that but insanity? What is that but powerlessness? Which is the insanity. We went to live with my parents-in-law. I found a job, then lost it through a brawl with a taxi driver. Who in here has had brawls with taxi drivers? All good alcoholics have. Mercifully, no one knew I was to have no real employment for 5 years, nor hardly draw a sober breath. My wife began to work in a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. I became a hanger-on at brokerage places, less and less desired because of my habits. Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity. Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, and often 3 got to be routine. That's a lot of drinking. 3 bottles of bathtub gin. Sometimes a small deal would net a few $100s, and I would pay the bars and delicatessen. Endlessly this went on, and I began to wake early, shaking violently. A tumbler full of gin followed by half a dozen bottles of beer would be required if I ate any breakfast. I still thought I can control the situation. There were periods of sobriety which would renew my wife's hope. Many of us can get a week in, a month in, a year in, because of some crazy thing, but it never lasts. But things got worse. The house was taken over by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law died. My wife became ill, as did my father-in-law. Then I had a promising business opportunity. Stocks were at a low point in 1932, and I had somehow formed a group to buy. I was to share generously in the profits. I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not even take one drink. He understood it's the first drink that gets him drunk. That didn't help him. I love these one-liners that people give you all the time. If you're an alcoholic, it's not going to help you. Yes, is it a good thing to do, a good thing to know? Sure, the first drink gets me drunk. Fine. If I take the first drink, it's going to lead to the allergy of the body, which is the physical craving for more liquor. I get it. But I can't not do it because I'm an alcoholic. The strange mental blank spot is going to happen. The subtle form of insanity that precedes the first drink is going to cloud my thoughts. And the obsession is going to overrule every other judgment in my mind. And I'm going to go to the liquor store. That's what the alcoholic does. So he was saying I was through forever. Before then I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife happily observed that this time I meant business. And so I did. Shortly afterward I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve? I simply didn't know. It hadn't even come to mind. Someone pushed a drink my way and I had taken it. Was I crazy? I began to wonder, for such an appalling lack of perspective came near being just that. See, he had gotten to the point where he would swear off booze and then he'd pick it up without even fighting it, without even saying this isn't a good idea. And another thing that you hear in AA, you're never going to get struck drunk. Well, that's exactly what was happening to Bill Wilson. And I've been struck drunk. Just absolutely no intention of drinking, knowing it's the worst possible move in the world. Could I have a bourbon, please? That's happened to me. That's the insanity that we need to be restored to, that they talk about in step 2. Sticking to my resolve, I tried again. Some time passed. Confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. I could laugh at the bars. Now I had what it takes. One day, I walked into a place to telephone. In no time, I was beating on the bar, asking myself how it happened. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk then, and I did just that. I signed myself into a 28-day treatment center without any outside pressure. I wanted to get off booze. I was the only person out of 30 people in the rehab that was in there because they wanted to be. Everybody else was in there because of DUIs and interventions. I was the only person that signed myself in to separate from alcohol because I knew it was killing me. When I got out of the 28-day rehab, I was going to 2 AA meetings a week and 2 outpatient a week. I thought that was sufficient. And I was telling everybody that I'm through with booze for good. And I'm paying all this money to go to outpatient. I'm going to the church basements, and drinking bad coffee. I was making a real serious effort to do this not drinking thing. And on the way to an AA meeting, the thought crossed my mind that I should buy a gallon of vodka and drink it. And I bought a gallon of vodka and I drank it. And it seemed like a good idea until about the 3rd glass of vodka. And while I'm drinking that 3rd glass of vodka, I started to pound the desk and say, how could I have been this stupid? How could I have done this? I've opened up the cage door of the beast and I don't know where it's going to drag me. How could I have been this stupid? The booze restored me to sanity. The insanity that they talk about for the alcoholic happens when we're sober. The stupidest, dumbest thing you've ever done in your life, you've done sober. And that's taken that next drink. Knowing the consequences, having experience with the consequences. He makes so clear in his story, and in the first 2 chapters, more about alcoholism, and there is a solution. He makes so clear what powerlessness looks like. And yet in AA groups all over the country, you hear all the time, first step to me just means I don't take a drink no matter what, even if my ass falls off. That's not what the first step is saying. First step is saying, it ain't you. You won't even be there for the decision. Your ego is taking on way too much, buddy. Because if you're an alcoholic, you have no power. You're not in charge of when that booze goes back in you. What you are in charge of is participating in a spiritual program that will place you in the sunlight of the Spirit where God can remove the obsession to drink. That's what you can do. But on your own, you can't do nothing. Or you're not an alcoholic, you're a heavy drinker. The remorse, horror, and hopelessness of the next morning is unforgettable. The courage to do battle was not there. My brain raced uncontrollably. There was a terrible sense of impending calamity. Anybody in here ever feel that impending calamity? That pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization? I hardly dared cross the street lest I collapse and be run down by an early morning truck, for it was scarcely daylight. I've had those anxiety attacks. I had one time, and I had to pull over to the side of the road and go into a motel. I had to lock myself in a bathroom. I was having a panic attack. I know exactly what he's talking about here. An all-night place supplied me with a dozen glasses of ale. My wreathing nerves were stilled at last. A morning paper told me that the market had gone to hell again. Well, so had I. The market would recover now. Then a mental fog settled down. Gin would fix that. 2 bottles and oblivion. I don't know about anybody else, but that oblivion was what I was interested in. The mind and body is a marvelous mechanism, for mine endured this agony 2 years more. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Again, I swayed dizzily before an open window or the medicine cabinet where there was poison, cursing myself for a weakling. You know, I got to tell you, the alcoholic is 60 times more likely than the non-alcoholic to commit suicide. This stark fact was brought home to me again this last Friday when I was at my home group meeting. A girl came up to me and she said, "Did you hear about Tom?" I go, "What?" She goes, "He killed himself last Monday." This is an individual who was a home group member in the Burnsville group for a decade. Had a ton of sponsees. One of my sponsees sponsored him. This is an individual that I was working with. I started up a couple of startup businesses with this guy. You know, I spent about 2 years ago, I spent a weekend with him in Palm Springs, California. Really, really good friend of mine. Alcoholic. Had the spiritual awakening with the steps. I know he did because I was there when it happened. But you need to continue with this stuff. You need to be consistent in your spiritual practice. Meeting, step, sponsorship. You need to be consistent with those to remain in the sunlight of the Spirit. Because sometimes when it starts to get dark and we're not in the sunlight anymore, we're like the last to know. And this individual had gotten to the place where some of us get to, where he understands that drinking is not an option, but death is. And that's what happened. He left a note to his 3 kids and his fiancée saying, "You'll all be better off without me." No, they wouldn't be. It's the big lie. It's the big lie. And it's the spiritual malady. That's what it is. Suicide is a symptom of alcoholism, like a lot of other things. There were flights from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish I feared I would burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to a lower floor lest I suddenly leap. A doctor came with a heavy sedative. Anybody in here use heavy sedatives to detox? Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative without the usual penalty. Mine was Xanax and vodka. This combination soon landed me on the rocks, and my wife saw something had to be done, and quickly. People feared for my sanity, and so did I. When drinking, which was almost always, I could eat little or nothing. I was 40 pounds underweight. I was a $130 soaking wet when I came into AA. My brother-in-law is a physician, though through his kindness I was placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. You know, you could have shaken a dead cat over him and it would have done more than belladonna and hydrotherapy. Best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though selfish and foolish, I had also been seriously ill bodily and mentally. It relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholism, the will is amazingly weak and concerning drink, though frequently remaining strong in other respects. My incredible behavior in the face of a desperate measure to stop was explained. This is where Dr. Silkworth basically tells Bill what the obsession of the mind is. Understanding myself now, I fared forth in high hope. You know, we're at the hour. I'm going to stop here, and we'll pick up. We'll pick up right here where we left off next week, if that's all right with everybody. Thank you for letting me share here tonight.
So what did I tell you, right? What did I tell you? A lot of information you probably didn't know. Some vital information and some vital practical application as well. That completes part 1 of the Bill Wilson story with Chris S. Next week, we're going to bring you part 2 on the following Monday. Don't forget to tune in. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Monty, Monty, Meyer, M-E-Y-E-R. And you can download this on MP3 link on our green download MP3 link on our webpage, or you can click on the play button if that's available to you, depending on the device you're listening to. Don't forget to share everything that we have on this freely with anybody. Listen, our whole thing is that we want to get the message out there that the lie is dead, we do recover. All you need to do is follow a few simple directions. All right. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty Man welcoming you again to 2015, and I'm wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
Without the booze, I've been living, that's a fact. Without the booze,
I've been making my way back.
without the booze, I've been learning day by day to let it go and stay out of my own way. Stay out of my own way. Stay out of my own way.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.